Hello? The road? It's for racing, not parking.
It's time to look at Cars games on the PSP. We've looked at Cars on the Game Boy Advance, Cars on the DS, Cars MMOs, and even, of course, the home console releases. Although not all of them yet, I do know this, I am getting to them. Cledge will literally do anything but play Cars and Cars Made International for any home console. Anyways, there were 3 different Cars games released for the PlayStation Portable, and I have had the pleasure of playing through all 3 of them. And I use the word pleasure very loosely because I enjoyed like 1.5 of them and absolutely despised 1. As always, I think this is going to be another mixed bag of a video in terms of my likes and dislikes. Anyway, so first up we have Cars for the PSP, released in summer 2006. Now, this game is already notable because it's the only game out of all the versions of this that did not feature Owen Wilson. This has Keith Ferguson voicing Lightning McQueen. The other actors from the original movie do voice their characters in this game. One thing I will say straight away about this game is the menu music goes so hard. So, Cars on PSP follows a different story to the home console version. The residents of Radiator Springs are all racing when Lightning turns a corner and finds the import racers from the start of the first film, also known as the delinquent road hazards, apparently. Anyway, these 4 racers were quite literally the epitome of cool in the 2000s for me. Like, I thought every car should look exactly like those 4. Anyway, spoiler alert, these 4 actually have a secret leader. Now, can you think of a certain Cars antagonist that could possibly lead these 4 racers to cause havoc for Lightning McQueen? I wonder. You guys know damn well I'm going to take every opportunity I can to make that stupid joke. That's right, as you play through the game, you find out that they are led by none other than Chick Hicks. Yay, he's back again. Now, I'm just going to say it right out, I really enjoyed Cars for PSP. Is it a perfect game? No. But there was a lot of effort put in. This version of Cars was developed by Locomotive Games, formerly known as Pacific Coast Power and Light. These guys developed Nuclear Strike and Road Rash 64 for the Nintendo 64, and then went on to develop some MX games, and then later on, Cars and Ratatouille for the PSP. They were bought out by THQ in 1999, and then were shut down by them in 2008. But then THQ obviously went bankrupt as well, so I guess karma's a bitch, really. Anyway, whilst I love the tracks on the original Cars home console game, some of the tracks on the handheld version were just super creative and not what I was expecting from this game. As to be expected with a lot of these games, there's a lot of cool shortcuts, but also just some incredible designs all round. There's one level called Iron Horse Junction, which is basically just a train yard, and it's just, I don't know, it was just really captivating for me, and it was something different compared to what I was used to, even if there were loads of those f***ers from Chuggington taunting me every time I went past them. There are some other cool tracks as well, including one where you end up driving through a bowling alley and then you can get a strike each time you go through, which I thought was quite a nice touch, even if the game doesn't actually show you the pins falling over, probably due to technical limitations. The game is broken up into a few segments, so you'll do a couple of races and then you'll get a boss fight between one of the 4 of the gang. You'll get a little cutscene before and a little cutscene after you win, then a few more races, rinse and repeat, all the way through until you get to the final showdown with Chick Hicks, which was actually quite a cool race, I'm not gonna lie. There have definitely been worse races between you and Chick Hicks, and I'm looking at you, Cars for the DS, I'm looking at you. Now, don't get me wrong, whilst I did enjoy this game, it is by no means a perfect game either. It has the standard kind of janky physics you've come to expect from the early Cars games, so if you're like me and you don't like those, then this game might start to wind you up a little bit. If you do like them, then good for you I suppose, because you'll enjoy it a lot more. On top of that, it also suffers from the other problem you tend to see in some of the other games, like how the f*** is Lizzie pulling away from you at the start of the race, and somehow still keeping ahead of you, going at like 200 miles per hour. It's also not a particularly long game either, but this was a handheld movie tie-in for the PSP, so I don't know what I was expecting really. But in the grand scheme of things, for a decent Cars game, these are pretty minor gripes to have. If you're looking to purchase an arcade racer for your PSP, I probably wouldn't recommend Cars as your first choice, with games like Burnout Legends and Ridge Racer on there as well. But if you're looking for Cars for your PSP, this is probably the best out of the three you can get. The Metacritic score for this game on PSP is 70 out of 100, with review scores ranging from 88 all the way down to 50. Now, I don't really quite understand how this game's earned a 50, I would definitely say the 70 range is where it should be. I must say I had a nice little nostalgia trip when I realised you could look at clips from the film. I scrolled all the way through and found an absolute gem hidden away. Yep, the Cars game featured clips from the movie, but also a trailer for Ratatouille. Just a cool random little piece of history, I guess. Anyway, on to our next game. Okay, so for our second Cars game on the PSP, we have Race-O-Rama. Now, this version is basically the same as the DS version, just a little bit more high-res. This game was developed by Tantalus Media, who also developed Cars International for the Game Boy and the DS, and then this for DS as well. Now, this is the third time that I've played through Race-O-Rama on this channel, albeit for a different platform, but still. My opinion of this game has definitely increased over time, especially for the home console version. Anyway, I'm going to make a point that I made in the DS video on this game as well, is that it just doesn't look very nice. I thought the first Cars game for the PSP actually looks quite good, considering the time it was released and the platform it was on. But Race-O-Rama on this console just does not look pretty at all, it's very pixely. Now, I know that art style was used primarily because I assumed they prioritized the DS version first, and this was in the same engine as International on DS, so I'm not surprised, but it's just not very pretty to look at. Now, once again, this game does follow the same story as the home console and DS version. It does feature the cutscenes from that game as well, which is really nice. Just this once, I thought I'd spare you from the Chick Hicks joke that's literally in the opening cutscene of the game, so you guys are welcome. Anyway, so driving-wise, McQueen handles just fine, the game plays fine. That's basically all I can really say. It's easier to control than the DS version, simply for the fact that you aren't using a D-pad this time, you actually have an analog stick that you can move around. Yes, the game looks better than the DS version, but it still doesn't look great, but you can see that Tantalus did put a lot of work into this, so I'm not going to grill them too hard. As I've said before, there's a lot of tracks in this game, and they are all actually pretty good. There's some decent shortcuts, there's some collectibles to get. It's the standard experience that we actually really enjoy. There isn't really much else that I can say about Race-O-Rama for the PSP that hasn't already been said by me in another video or by someone else in a different video. Yes, it has Candace saying daddy in a cringe way. Yes, it has El Machismo voiced by Randy Savage. It's the standard beats that you know I love to make jokes about. Now, much like the DS version, Race-O-Rama doesn't have an official Metacritic score because it only has one official critic review, and that is 50 out of 100, which I don't think is a particularly fair review. I would say around the mid-60s to 70 mark would be acceptable for this game, but that's just me. I'm still going to complain about it anyway. One thing I failed to mention about the handheld version of Race-O-Rama is how much I actually quite like the last race. Now, I know I said this about the previous Cars game as well, but this Chick Hicks race is actually pretty cool. Unlike the home console version, it's a pure one-on-one with Chick, except he gets members of his crew to try and intervene and stop you as you go around, including Candace, El Machismo, and Stinger, the characters you have to race before Chick. Don't get me wrong, it's not exactly a masterclass in arcade racing, but I thought it was a very cool end to what is a fairly decent game for the PSP. Anyway, so that's pretty much all I have to say about Cars Race-O-Rama. So let's get on to what I can only describe as the worst Cars game for PSP, Cars 2.
I don't want to go. Speed. I am speed.
How dare this version of the game use that incredible piece of music. Also, I love how blatant the dialogue doesn't match up to Lightning McQueen's mouth moving. Anyway, Cars 2 for PSP was developed by Virtual Toys. Also, I know in the DS video I credited the wrong developer with that game, so I am really sorry. Anyway, this version of the game launched late in 2011 as compared to all the other versions releasing in the summer. I'm so glad that we waited the longest for the worst version. So I was singing the praises of Cars 2 for home consoles, and to be honest with you, I kinda like the ambition behind the DS version as well, but by God, this is quite possibly one of the most boring games I've ever played in my entire life. We had two pretty good arcade racing games in the Cars series for PSP, and this developer decided the best direction to take this series in was a f***ing slot racer. I'd rather spend hundreds on actually buying Scalextrics in real life than play a slot racing Cars game for my PSP. The worst part is, this game literally pranks you into thinking it's quite similar to the home console versions. You have the same menu and the same vibes right as you start, and then suddenly, bam, slot racer. Anyway, now I've complained about the genre of racing this game is it actually any good at being a slot racer? Yeah, kind of, I guess. It's fine, it functions well enough. It is a bit goofy and sometimes the mechanics just don't work how they're intended. But I guess they achieved what they set out to do, which was to create a Cars slot racing game. I don't know about you guys, but I'd honestly take Cars 1 for the Game Boy Advance over this shit. Graphically, this game just looks fine, I guess. I personally think the first Cars game on PSP is the best looking out of the three. This game just doesn't look quite right to me. They kind of copied the art style from the home console versions, but it just doesn't look anywhere near as good. And that's probably just down to the console it's on, but I don't know. It's not for me. The game follows the same basic structure as the home console version. It's just a shame that it turned out the way it has, because it just could have been so much better. I honestly would have preferred it if this game was just a port of the DS one. I mean, if you like slot racing games, then this is definitely worth checking out, but it's just such a disappointment compared to basically every other game in the series. Anyway, on Metacritic, this game literally has 3 reviews. 2 of them give it 60 out of 100, and 1 of them gives it 65. Now, obviously, because of my distaste for the genre, I'm a bit biased and probably think it should be lower, but I guess 60 seems about fair for what it is, because at least the game still functions. The other 2 games in this video I actually played through in its entirety, but this I could barely stomach for about an hour before I just gave up, because I'd already seen all that the game had to offer. At the end of the day, this is only my opinion, so take what I say with a pinch of salt. If you enjoy this game, then good for you, that's great. The same goes for any of the other Cars games I've moaned about throughout these videos. If you like them, then good, because they're meant to be liked, that's the point. Anyway, that covers the 3 Cars PSP releases. What do you guys think of these games? Have you played them? And if you have, do you have a favourite of the PSP releases? Please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell for notifications for future uploads as I keep diving deeper into more and more niche Cars video games. I've got some cool videos lined up covering Cars and all other kinds of games coming soon. So as always, I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.
Excuse me, fellas, just scooching on through here.
Oh, y'all ought to know better than to compete with a mom on a mission.